I think the 20th century was all about chemistry. The 21st century could be about biology, and I think this is a starting point that puts that rooting material, puts that sugars into the soil, which helps kick-starting that biological system.
Robert, you've done this Nuffield scholarship. Nuffield is the main scholarship award for farmers to go and study important issues abroad. And you've been to Australia with this one.
My Nuffield is about the agronomic importance of soil carbon.
The agronomic, so that's the importance to farming, really.
Yeah, looking at it in terms of why soil carbon is actually important. I mean, plants get all their carbon needs from the atmosphere, so why worry about soil carbon? But soil carbon is all about feeding the soil biology, that biological system working for you, building humus in the soil. That massively improves soil structure, soil nutrient holding ability, soil water retention, and by doing that you get much more efficient crop production and more efficient use of fertilizers. If you're in a conventional system, you'll be able to get away with far fewer fertilizer inputs and should get healthier plants to the benefit as well. I mean, I was on a couple of herds in Australia where these guys were producing in order of 9,000 litres a cow, with cows that pasture all year round, supplemented with pasture silage and grain, and using 300 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. Yet the grass was starting to look sick and they were struggling to get the output from the grass and started using compost instead. Within 3 years of using compost, they are growing at least as much grass now. They are growing better quality grass, the stock looks healthier on this grass, their yields are still where they were, and they're now looking at actually carrying more cows.
What type of cow do you need for this system, Robert?
For this type of system where we're relying on a lot of forage, we tend to go for a smaller, deep-bodied cow with plenty of room and capacity. I mean, these ones here, this is just the first cow, she's just 2-year-old, but will grow out into a bigger cow like the one behind her, which is a more mature cow, something that can eat large amounts of forage but is also fairly light on its feet, so in wet weather we don't do too much damage to the pastures.
So here we are at this pasture. It's the end of quite a productive summer and this is still quite a lot left.
Yeah, I mean, we're grazing this now. This has had sort of 45 days rest since the last grazing. We should be able to graze this again, probably going to be in October now. So we'll get, one more graze off it.
It's like Joel Salatin, the American grazer, says, it's the most extraordinary thing about this way of producing food is that the more pasture you grow, the more dry matter you grow, the more fertility you're building, the more carbon you're getting to the soil to produce even more next time. So it's like almost like getting a free lunch, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's the sun's energy that drives everything, and it's the plants that collect that energy and feed it through the rest of the system. The bigger solar panel we can have here, and the longer that's in place on the field throughout the season, the more of that sun we can trap and utilise. And then we'll slowly work through this. We'll probably finish this field down the bottom in December.
So what's going to happen to this next?
The dry cows will come in here. We'll probably start from this end, so they'll come in and we'll strip graze this one. These mixtures, being deep rooting and also staying leafy to a more mature stage, means we can grow a bigger canopy which traps more sunlight, which is putting much more sugar back into soils. You're getting the roots going into soils. It all helps to invigorate the soil system, put more carbon back into the soils, and then you get plant material dying on the surface. That all goes back into soils. You get the cows consuming it. The dung all goes back into the soil, so it's all building that soil system up. There's some plantain there, all headed as well now. Right. But yeah, I mean, the ryegrasses don't come through. You'll see the fescues 3-4 years down the line, the fescues will all come into their own as well. Right. So. The first field that we actually put into it was one which the contractors that used to run the place told me was one of the heaviest clay fields on the farm. was grazed for 4 years. We then pulled that out to put a crop of kale in, and rather than being lumpy clay, this just broke down like flour. It totally transformed the soil structure, and that's mainly due to that increase in soil carbon. The root material that was in there and everything else just loosened the soil up. It was much less dense, and you're starting to see as time goes on, these soils are starting to darken in colour, which is a sign that there is a build-up of carbon coming into those soils now. Research at the minute is suggesting that for every 1% you raise oil levels in a ruminant diet, you will drop methane emissions by 3.5%. These lays, from the tests we have done, are running between 4 and 5% oil. Most straight ryegrass lays will run closer to the 2% mark. So we're actually gaining about 3% oil in the plant itself, and when this is making up the majority of the cow's diet, then we can assume that we are getting a reduction in methane production. These oils are your predominantly the omega-3s, which are then going to the cows, and they're the healthy oils.
So there's a payoff for consumers as well as the farmer here. Yeah. In addition to the benefits for farming, I mean, a mixed sward like this must have enormous importance for biodiversity.
Very much so. I mean, we've get a lot of press about putting in strips for nectar strips for bees and butterflies and all this kind of thing. What we tend to find with these lays is in the middle of summer they will be buzzing with bees, moths, butterflies, everything else. They hold a huge amount of insects. Why worry about little strips when you can grow 30 or 40 acres of this and get all the other benefits at the same time? Since we've switched onto these lays, we're producing more grass than we ever were with ryegrass and fertilisers. I don't think fertiliser would really benefit these lays because you've got so much clover in there in the early years, and with the deep roots and everything else, these just keep going. I mean, this year we've had a second dry summer on a row, and these have kept finding moisture and kept growing, which ryegrass, I have a ryegrass lay in this year, and I now know why I don't grow it anymore. I think the 20th century was all about chemistry. The 21st century could be about biology, and I think this is a starting point that puts that rooting material, puts that sugars into the soil, which helps kickstarting that biological system.